Good evening and welcome to the Plymouth Community Housing Discussion. I'm Jay Coleman and I'm just going to go around the table and ask everyone to introduce themselves.
I'm Jill Davis. I live in Woodstock, but I used to live in Plymouth. And I have a special interest in housing.
Jill does a lot of incredible work in the town of Woodstock, and I thought her perspective might be helpful because towns should share resources. My name is Tesha Buss, and I'm your representative-elect for Plymouth, Woodstock, and Reading.
I'm Mike Coleman. I'm with Plymouth Planning Commission and Zoning.
And Elaine?
Elaine Pauley. Margot Monroe.
And would anybody on Zoom like to introduce themselves at all? Guess they're listening. Does anybody have any questions at all that they'd like to start this off with? Concerns, ideas, something that's you've been interested in?
I'd love to find out at this level of where Plymouth is with regards to housing, how to begin to have affordable housing. The first steps and figuring out how to manage that need.
Absolutely. So that actually might put us through some of these slides because some of these things are things we could enact relatively quickly or that are available to lots of folks quickly. Not all of them are housing developments per se, because that doesn't always work for our small rural towns. So for instance, one of the things is the VHIP program, where you can have an ADU, that is an ancillary dwelling unit. I'm actually creating one at my primary residence in Woodstock, and I wanted to do it, to help to solve the problem, but also to learn so that I could contribute the end user perspective instead of the program perspective. And so so that you work with a person at the state level. You put in your application. The application's very simple. It's very easy it's not even as complicated as a mortgage application. And it is to get up to $30,000 to renovate your garage into a studio or one-bedroom apartment, say, or to create it from scratch. That's up to $50,000. So you put in your application. The person comes to your home and walks you through the whole process. It's really hands-on and not intimidating. So then you go through for me, I chose a LaValley's kit build because that reduced my upfront confusion as to hiring an architect and figuring things out. So the kit comes, and I'm going to have a garage on the first floor and a very simple one-bedroom with a bathroom on the second floor. So not complicated in terms of its entry point. And then you do get to some complicating levels where you have to, I got halfway through the process and they said, now you have to submit an application to be a commercial building permit with fire and public safety. So that is the point where I'm at now, is completing that part of the application process. And one of the things that has been discussed is, if it is a kit build, how much of that architectural design could be relaxed because the companies already have so many of those standards taken care of for the end consumer. Because I want you to be able to build that garage as quickly and effortlessly as possible and get someone in the door without having to jump through a lot of challenging hoops from a paperwork perspective. So that is the VHIP program. You have to rent at a certain price, but you do not have to choose someone that's homeless or a voucher if it's the ADU program. VHIP, Vermont Housing Improvement Program, does have other ways to renovate a house, so you can have a 3,000 square foot house and turn it into 3 one-bedroom units or something, however you want to divide up your home. But for that program, it does have to be someone that's homeless.
So can you tell us again, what's an ADU for folks?
Ancillary dwelling unit. So it's on your same parcel of land. You do not have to subdivide. So your garage can turn into that exterior space that is not attached to your building. So, one is interior renovation, the other is, it's a separate space from your house. Ancillary dwelling unit is separate from your house. You do have to make sure that you have enough water supply for them, and that your septic can take the extra bedroom or 2 bedrooms, however much you choose. So if you have a 4-bedroom septic and you have a 2-bedroom house, you can have a 2-bedroom ancillary dwelling unit ADU.
It can also be attached to the house. So when you look at many of the pictures of what people in like Montpellier have done, it can be, you can subdivide your house into 2 units, or you can just build a little piece onto your house. So it looks like you've just built an extension, but actually you've built somewhere with a separate entrance, separate bathroom, separate kitchen. Those are the definitions.
Thank you, Jill.
Now, are these grants or are they loans?
These are grants.
This is cash that you don't have to return. You just have to meet the criteria.
And basically, when I ran my numbers, the amount of money that they're giving you up front is to offset the rent reduction. So you have to rent at a reduced rate for 5 years. So when you look at what it could rent for and what you have to rent for, and you take it over 5 years, you're basically getting your money up front to do your renovations.
And then long term, you end up with an accessory dwelling unit. So one of the ways that accessory dwelling units are being promoted is to encourage people to build them so that you can take in the child that isn't quite ready to leave home, and then that's their living accommodation, or it's the place where you put your elderly parent or in-law, instead of sending them to a home and paying forever and ever and ever. Keep them in your home, but give them a separate unit. Or the way some other people have used it is they've built this 1-bedroom place and they've gone in there, and then their children have gone in the main house. Because everybody's having this problem of where to live. So if you start thinking about your own property as an estate and how many families can you have living there, it's a way to do that.
And I'm just curious, because we're in Plymouth, this is a statewide program, so anybody across the state's eligible. Does Plymouth zoning lend itself to that kind of accessory dwelling unit, Mike?
Yes. However, it does need conditional use permitting, and septic and well are the 2 primary considerations for such.
That you have to have sufficient.
You also have to have parking.
How much parking do you need? How much parking do you need for an extra dwelling?
1 bedroom, 1 car, one car space per bedroom.
Right.
Got it. I had another question for you. Is there a percentage? So can for instance, Ludlow, if your house is 1,000 square feet, your ancillary dwelling unit can only be 200 square feet. Is there a percentage?
At this time, no, but there should be. Because what happens is we've got a perfect example in town. People, they build a beautiful barn, post and beam construction, 3 bedrooms, rent it out to skiers, and then live in a 2-bedroom ranch. So the accessory building has taken over the primary use. And our zoning does require primary use.
Right.
Of the main building.
Correct?
And so you'll determine that by a larger square footage?
Yes. Yep. And you're limited as your square footage up to 5,000 square feet. And that includes living square footage, not footprint.
Okay. All right.
And it's actually called an accessory dwelling. Or in the
accessory,
previous
right.
zoning,
I've seen it in
it was
both
called
as
the
well.
mother-in-law apartment. And I
Right.
think we took that terminology out. In fact, our zoning, when we revise our zoning, we will have to make a clarification, because it is, at the present time, it's not mentioned in our zoning regulations. It's an inadvertent mistake.
But the state has set it up so that so you should be able to get through the permit process for an ADU more simply than you could if you're going to build a new property.
About the same. It's about the same, yeah.
Okay.
And so I think we were curious about this question. to build an accessory dwelling, does that require Act 250 approval? Do you happen to know?
If your original subdivision was an Act 250 subdivision, absolutely. But in many cases with Act 250, it's called an incidental change of use. I can't remember the exact language, but it does allow for that.
They allow for an accessory dwelling unit to be built?
Yeah. And there again, sewer and water and wastewater.
Yeah.
And frontage and setbacks. So, can't go everywhere. There's a lot of places that can't go. For example, in the Village District, you have 4,000 square feet. In RD10, you have 10,000 square feet. So, putting a multiple tenant house in the village is really the best place for it. However, it has some limiting factors.
Are you considering looking at your ordinances to see if there are any obstacles that you might be ready to remove?
Yes.
Are you doing that with Two Rivers?
No, actually, we've done most of it in-house, and our next step is to go through Two River.
Okay.
And they help you to double-check your
Yes.
work,
Yeah. Well, your zoning ordinance wants to follow your town plan.
right?
And Tish, am I on the correct slide still?
Yes, we can go to the next slide, which just defines out what we've basically already spoken about. The $30,000 for rehabbing a 0 to 2 bedroom unit, or up to $50,000 for rehabilitating a 3+ bedroom unit, or up to $50,000 for creation of new units.
So that's a lot of money to get you started, $50,000 for like a guest house.
Now, those projects have to meet the energy standards?
You know, they don't specifically detail that out in the program. We were actually just speaking about this in preparation of this meeting. I'm going to be spray foaming my garage, but I think that's the reason why they halfway through the process said, oh, we should go with commercial building standards, so that there would be the energy component in there.
Because the energy component is in private standards. Anytime that we issue a building permit, one of those requirements are the owner of the property has to self-certify.
Yes.
And we've had a number of cases, too, just on the lake, where they took summer cottages and turned them into year-round residents.
Yes, some towns are considering working towards mandating HERS ratings, and don't tell me to
Home
tell
energy rating
you,
system.
thank you. The acronyms are extraordinary here. But yes, but there wasn't anything on the form saying that you had to meet a certain energy standard.
Because that's a state law, the energy,
Yes.
So maybe that's just inherent that everybody's doing it.
It would have to be, you know,
Right.
and it should be in that.
It should be, absolutely. And that's R30 is the basic level of insulation.
In the ceiling, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it's 16 on the walls.
Well, I'm sure they're probably, if you have somebody that's a little economically challenged, right, and you're providing this housing at a discount, probably utilities are going to be a concern for them as well as the rent. So I imagine that's...
Yes, it's nice to think about the rent as including utilities, so that what you're providing is both a low rent and a low monthly cost of living.
Absolutely. And we can move on to other programs that would actually, there's going to be some weatherization work that will be in our upcoming slides. But our next slide has to do with zero energy modular homes, which is another great way to get housing in a quicker way into the rural landscape. This program is working with Efficiency Vermont to provide a bit of cost reduction on putting solar panels on the roof. This is income-based as well, I believe, so that you can go to, you can go there and find out a lot more information about how to go through this process. There's a phone number for Peter Schneider, who will take you through the Efficiency Vermont portion of it. This is a potentially really great program for, I think, rural areas. Next up is the first generation home buyer. This is a $15,000 grant towards down payment and closing costs. Plus, if you are eligible, you can get the additional $25,000 to $30,000 for more of your down payment and closing cost assistance.
So the state really wants to promote home buying. And as you get to know more people, there's always people that want to rent, but it's in our landscape, it's very unstable because so many of our homes that are rented are owned by an individual landlord. And when the individual landlord changes their mind, I'm sure you've seen it in Plymouth, we have in Woodstock, when that landlord wants to sell the house and get their money out of their property, that means the renter is homeless. That doesn't happen when there's somebody like Twin Pines who owns 45 units. They're stable, but so few of our people live in that stable situation that renting in Vermont seems to be very unstable, and it feels like it would be great if we could get more people into home ownership. And programs like this help reduce the amount of the mortgage payment. So if you can get the mortgage payment down to what somebody would be paying for rent, then you might be talking to people very differently about home ownership.
Does that first generation home buyer apply to just a single family residence, or could it apply to a duplex or a condominium or?
I don't know.
It can apply because that's how we helped a family in Woodstock,
Okay,
because that's in a condominium building.
that was VHCB though.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah.
That would have to be something I have to look into.
Okay, I'll write it down.
Okay.
I'm sure they would though, because a lot of these programs are designed for larger conurbations, like Winooski and Burlington, where to get the price right for a first-time buyer, you're talking a multi-dwelling unit.
Right, yeah. Most of this that is being, most of the housing that's being built right now are multi-units. And that's what's being hugely promoted by the state. Our challenge here is 18 units in the middle of Plymouth doesn't look the same as 18 units in the middle of Burlington. So, and that seems to be the threshold for these larger developers that are creating apartment buildings. You need, from what our research has led us to, 18 units is the minimum number for having an apartment building, and then going through all of the process of paperwork. So if you're going to be renting at lower, for the workforce, there are audits that you have to do every year. Well, an annual audit is $8,500. So if you have one unit, that's only going to pay for the audit, and so on and so on. So
And that's what you discovered from your Twin Pines?
that's correct. So there's an economy of scale when you want to create a building for a rental market. So most of these programs promote home ownership for that reason as well.
And so that particular program, how much is available per unit? Do you recall?
It was 15 to 30,000,
Okay.
wasn't it?
That's correct, because it's per home buyer, not necessarily,
Okay.
right.
Okay, got it. In the modular housing that we were just looking at, the prefab, I guess, I don't know if that's the correct word, modular or prefab?
Modular, I think.
And does our zoning allow for that kind of housing?
Yes, it does. Our zoning does not restrict in the type of house you build. For example, container houses.
Okay.
So we've addressed that already. It's multifamily. It's the multifamily house. What happens? Somebody buys a house, they put up a small studio apartment or a garage, and now it becomes a rental. And you're almost on the threshold of being a commercial property.
With one rental?
Yeah, it's a rental. It's rental is commercial.
And is that in the zoning rules?
Yes.
Is that something that we could consider changing? Because it feels
Yeah,
like a
it should-
social
it
good
should
right
really
now.
change. Because we're running into it with our short-term rentals, which are a
They
whole
are,
different ball.
I agree, they're commercial.
And you could extend that right to the accessory dwelling unit that somebody built on their house to rent to skiers for the season, or even to just rent. That becomes a commercial venture.
So in Woodstock, I've been working with the Economic Development Commission, and we've come up with a couple of programs. And we've done quite a lot of research in other towns. So one of the things we've got a couple of grant programs, nothing like the 30,000, but 10,000 and 5,000. And one of the conditions we've put on is that in order to get a grant, you need to rent to a local worker who works at least 30 hours a week. So we have an options tax, and we're putting that money toward creating workforce housing. So maybe, I don't know if you're able to rewrite the ordinances that you treat a property that's short-term rental in one way and a property that's rented to local workforce in a different way.
You're kind of discriminating then.
Yes, deliberately.
Yeah.
I don't think it's illegal discrimination. We've done quite a lot of work with the fair housing rules, and it's not illegal. It is discrimination, but it's not against the fair housing rules.
I'm taking notes. No to commercial accessory dwellings.
Right. Well, that is the thing, is it has to be safe. You do have to make sure all of your fire safety and egress is
Then you fall into commercial.
You do. You do.
So it's that threshold.
Because any rental property is commercial.
Well, there's commercial safety standards, and then there are different commercial standards in other regards. And
Energy, lighting,
right.
width of stairways, egress windows, smoke detectors, fire sprinklers.
Yeah, so your bank, if you get usually a duplex, they consider it like pretty much similar to a single-family dwelling. There's not, until you get to that 4-unit, I think, 3 or 4 unit.
I believe it is 4, yeah.
Yeah. But then, like you say, the minute it's a 2-dwelling, then public safety is very involved, right, with all the code requirements.
And right now, Plymouth does not have a building permit per se. You can build your own house, you can wire your own house, you can put plumbing in your own house.
Do you not have to adopt the... Oh, right, yes.
The
Yeah,
only
that's
thing
true.
you have to adopt is the energy standards.
Right.
And do you work with the homeowner to do that self-certification?
We do. We actually require it before they're supposed to take occupancy, but we never get the forms. You know, it's a constant battle. I think we've gotten 2. One was Paul Glynn, who's a builder from Belmont, Massachusetts.
Wow.
I think that's about, Rick Weiss. Rick Weiss was very good about providing one, too.
I wonder how many people know it's necessary.
No, they do. Yeah, and they're told that, and it just...
They usually come back and look for it when it's being sold.
Yep.
Well, right, yes, and as a commercial property, you get your certificate of occupancy from the state, so.
Versus the town.
Right,
Exactly.
versus the town. But in Woodstock, it's both.
They have a building permit process.
That's
Right.
right.
As does Ludlow.
Right.
Okay.
So is there a part of you that wants it to be commercial, and so that you know it is safe?
You're renting it out to somebody, it should be.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so then is the assumption that because it's commercial, you've done that at the state level, so there's not a need to sort of double certify
Nope,
at the
it's
local
because
level?
you've hired licensed contractors.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and you would have to do that through the state level, so you know that that's secure then.
No, but
It's a higher level.
It's not easy.
Trust.
In Woodstock, we try to write, okay, this is what you need to do. There's this permit, and then there's this permit, and then this permit. And the document has just got so long and complicated, and I couldn't work my way through it. It's really complex.
It is, which also brings me to, as a part of the VHIP program, it's important to talk to your contractors when they write up quotes to make sure that they truly detail out what needs to be included so that the grant can satisfy. So, for instance, there's a little bit of extra money in the ADU program for connecting to your water and your either sewer or septic. But it has to be really detailed out what your general plumbing is, just for hooking up bathrooms and kitchens, and what specifically is allocated to that interconnection. So it's important to also just really thoroughly communicate.
And is that, would that, by any chance, include expanding a leach field, or is that kind of?
Yeah, in most cases, that's what has to be done. Actually, in a few sales we've had recently, they simply put an auxiliary sewer system in for in this particular case, it was a barn turned into an apartment. Relatively easy to design, expensive to put in, and that separate unit had its own tank and its own leach field. Problem with buddying systems up, and this happens a lot with condominiums, is they put 4 units all on one septic tank, and someone in the group of those 4 people has a garbage disposal. We all know how much septic systems like garbage disposals. And then throw the bacon fat down there with your hot water and your Dawn, and you've just destroyed your anaerobic action in your tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have 1 out of 4 to choose who did it. And who's going to pay for the repair.
Well, there is a program that is coming out in January with the state, and we'll send out the information as soon as it becomes available to the towns, and it is specifically to help upgrade water and sewer and septic. So, well, I guess more septic, because it is more small scale. There's already work being done with towns on water and sewer systems to help upgrade them. A lot of ARPA funds, but this is separate money for individual homeowners. And I think that could work in real nice conjunction with this new housing option.
Mm.
So there's also going to be launched soon, it's called the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program, WRAP. And that will help to weatherize homes, and it's going to go on an on-bill pay model. So while there isn't a lot of information about it, and I did not do a deep dive into the specifics, I used Heat Squad to do weatherization, and that went onto my Green Mountain power bill. So they basically took the amount of money that you would save by weatherizing your home, put it on your power bill, so that it should be, if the money works out, a wash. Your savings should pay for the work to weatherize. And then when, of course, you've paid it off, you still continue reaping the benefits of your savings.
So this is really important. So often when we talk about housing, we think about creating new houses. And actually there's this whole other way, which is making sure that people who already have a house can afford to stay in their house. Because then you've created housing. And so if we can get more people to weatherize their homes, then that will help calm the situation.
SEVCA has done a very good job
Yes.
at that so far.
Yes.
Is that an expansion of SEVCA?
I am not for sure if this is an expansion.
So SEVCA is very income related. Is
Right.
this more open? That could be the difference.
And it could be, this is working through the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, so
We'll find out more when it goes out. it's really important to talk to everybody about weatherizing their home. So often we forget that there's a big part of the population that doesn't do weatherization, and so, you've talked about weatherizing your house. I've weatherized my house. We don't notice so much the drastic change in oil bills, and yet there's somebody down the road who hasn't done anything, who's just being walloped right now by prices being doubled and costing double the price to go into oil.
Right.
Yeah. But if we could get some of those houses weatherized, it would help.
At Housing Vermont, well, we had them come out, of course, and do an assessment. But I think it was a couple of $100. Now, there might be some people who can't afford that.
To pay for that grant, to get them to come out?
They did a blower door test to see how leaky your house was.
Right.
And that, back in the day when I did Good Commons, I believe that was $175. And I agree with you, that could be...
Yeah, we paid up $200 for it. Because there are people who can't afford that.
Sustainable Woodstock has been running a program where they pay for those programs. And I also think if somebody came to the Hub, the new organization that's replacing Woodstock Area Relief Fund, I think it would be looked on very kindly to pay those kind of bills. Because they're the bills that you can put your $200 and it will help somebody into the future. Right. Just filling the oil tank, you're going to do that again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I just read that report by Efficiency Vermont, and it looked at median household income and fuel expenses, and Plymouth is worse off than 60% of the state. Like, their energy burden is higher. Yeah, right here in Plymouth.
So Sustainable Woodstock is a good person to work with, and I'd say that the Hub. And then if they're and then Sustainable Woodstock works out how to work with SEVCA and all the other state programs. So sometimes you're just directing people to programs that are already out there.
And so are Plymouth residents eligible to work with Sustainable Woodstock?
Yes, yeah. They consider Plymouth one of their regions, okay. And same with the Hub.
Okay.
Plymouth's getting represented. That's right. The next slide is aging at home. So it's sort of like the home share program. The home share model is not available in the lower region of the state. So the Thompson Senior Center reached out and said, can we look at your model? And Home Share generously said, yes, please. So the Thompson Senior Center has created a home share program. They've only had one match so far. But I think it's a really interesting way for us to look at rural housing, particularly with an aging population. So they do matches based on the needs of the person in the home, how much the person wants to be hands-on or off that shares the home, and they have to match up pets. Living styles, a lot of times it is, shared kitchen facilities, not always bathrooms, but certainly shared kitchen facilities. So there are definitely a lot of things that they look at to help folks be more successful with the match.
And so they are actively looking for people who are prepared to host a home share. So somebody who owns or rents a property and would like to have somebody share that home with them. And
How many successes have you had in the recent year?
So the Thompson Center is on their first one, but the program in Burlington is up to hundreds. And many of these people, so very often the person who's the host and the guest. So the guest is often offered a reduced rent in exchange for, say, shoveling the pathway or cooking a meal one night a week, or not caretaking, not personal care. They're not your attendant. But it's just having another active adult in the home is the idea. And so it seems like that could really help our housing situation. We have many people living in larger accommodation that don't need it. And the Thompson Center takes so much care over matching. It's not like advertising for somebody to come and live in your house. There's a whole process that they go through.
I have friends who actually have done it on their own. and
Yes.
found people, yeah,
And the success?
yeah.
That's wonderful to hear.
So if you have anyone else and they would like to use the Thompson Centre, then there's a contact email to go to, and they'll help take some of that burden off the finding the person.
And if you ever want to have one of the most delicious lunches, the Thompson Senior Center's chef is excellent.
How much
Where is
do
the Thompson Center?
Woodstock?
Right in Woodstock. It's almost across from the high school.
How much do Plymouth people use the Thompson Centre?
We don't.
I don't
It's-
think many of us do. I mean,
All
I
ours
go sometimes.
Comes out of Ludlow. Ludlow.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of them
Yeah.
go to Ludlow.
But they're prepared to do this service for Plymouth.
I know, I get their newsletter and everything.
Yeah, good. Spread the word, Margot.
So next is the Housing Ready Toolbox. And this is a list of questions. And I pulled this up, and we don't have to, I'm going to ask the questions, and we don't have to obviously answer them, but these are the types of questions that should be asked in a community to identify the needs, to look at local zoning, and then hopefully to create a housing committee to do some on-the-ground style work. So here are the questions. Who can and cannot afford to live in the community of Plymouth?
I'm sure there's a lot of people, but they're not going to tell you that.
Right.
And we've seen, I think, since the pandemic, some people leave Plymouth.
Yeah, well, and most of the sales have all been second homes, too. So,
Are you finding first primary residence people selling to second home?
nope, they're just not selling.
I'm sorry, say a few more words?
They're just not selling,
The houses.
correct.
Well, wait a minute, I think maybe you two didn't connect. Because a lot of homeowners here sold to second homeowners, wouldn't you say that?
No.
Really?
Yeah, in doing our PTTRs, we're coming up with, well, I can rattle 3 off the top of my head in 3 years. There isn't that many.
Primary homeowners that sold to
Correct.
second homeowners.
So is it mostly second homeowners to second homeowners?
Yeah. Or second homeowners to someone that moves here to take advantage of the low-income property tax rebates or prebates, or I don't know what they call it now, but and they'll stay a resident for a couple of years and then sell. We've had a couple of hawk condominiums. That's process. We've gone through that process already, and they've just about doubled their monies. So it's more of a speculation.
And then a few first homeowners to first homeowners, right?
Oh God, I can't think of any.
Well, your neighbours, the Brooklyn couple.
They moved from Brooklyn, but they rented it out as a short-term rental before they moved up here.
But now they're here full time.
Yeah.
That's pretty common too. Many of the people do use the rental service, whether it's a short-term or a long-term rental, which pays their taxes.
Right. And how many of them have now moved up here full-time? Do you have any finger on the
God,
pulse
I
of
wish I
that?
could come up with that number. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Sure, yeah.
We've had a few. I think there's 2 of them I can think of right away. They were primary homeowners here. They went to foreclosure. Banks took them, and then the house was speculated. One particular house by the Echo Lake Inn, they painted, redid the floors, and doubled the price.
Yeah, I know, they did.
And
Did it
that's-
sell again? I saw a truck there the other day.
I don't think it's sold yet. It doubled.
They didn't do much in there.
No,
I actually went in
yeah, I did too.
with somebody.
So, but that's been common too. And that's mostly what, in the beginning of the pandemic, that's what was selling, was anything from $250 to $450. that range of house, and there again, a lot of those were smaller, up on Round Top on a small lot, 3-bedroom chalet, that's what was selling. We're now kind of shifted to a much higher end house. I think our last one went out at up on Bear Hill, 1.6 mil. We just saw a flip on Hawk for, I believe that was 1.3 million.
So I'm just thinking, I started on this discussion just as representing my employer. We have a lot of people, we have 25 full-time employees, some of them have families. Some of our workforce is now remote, but there's a very sizable chunk that would like to live in Vermont and like to live in Plymouth. And there's really no affordable rental housing for people who are, I would say, earn a regular living. There's no, I don't know if this may have been true for a long time in Plymouth because of its proximity to the mountains at the ski hills, but there's no really affordable homes to buy, no place to rent. And we have a variety of interests, right? Whether we have some folks that are single that would like to live here, some with small families or just starting a family that would like to be living and working in town. And I think we're going to see that with a couple of the new businesses that are opening up, right? We know it's hard to find employees. The general store is opening back up. The shop over at the Salt Ash Inn is going to be opening up and is supposedly going to have some employees. So I don't know, if these folks are going to have to commute. And I've also noticed that, this has been our concern with the town, trying to attract and retain employees. And if you get somebody from out of town, there's really no place for them to live in Plymouth. So I just wanted to kind of, if you're watching on television and you're wondering if there's a need, I can say there's definitely some need.
Yeah, there is. In fact, there's I call it the Yellow House on Kingdom Road on the left-hand side, just came out for sale. It's on the market for half a day. I believe $160 they got for it. And the fellow that owns the Echo Lake Inn purchased the house simply for a place for his employees to have somewhere to live. Mm-hmm. So it's the same case that James went through.
Do you know? Have you worked out what an affordable rent would be for some staff?
Well, I mean, I believe they say if you're paying over 30% of your...
Yeah, that's
right?
The theory.
You can take an average wage of $20 an hour times 40 hours. That's $800.
But that's even below the
times 4. So.
But my question is very precise.
Yeah.
What could your employees pay? What would they pay to rent somewhere?
So I think if you're talking about, a single person or maybe a couple, the single person obviously is, if it's one income, probably $1,000 to $1,200 a month would be.
And that would be stretching it.
Yeah. A family could probably pay, I would think, $1,600 a month. Depending on household income.
Depending on whether utilities are included too.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And taxes. Taxes are $100 a month. If you're going to heat your home, there's another $100 a month. Internet's $100 with telephone.
It's just really interesting.
Heats it up pretty quick.
It's really interesting to try and get a handle on those numbers because you've got the 30% rule, and that's way many people are paying much more than that. So it's really interesting to talk to people and find out what they really are prepared to pay.
What they have to pay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Transportation is also an issue here.
Yes. Because and that is an issue because it means that on top of your rent you have to run a good car.
Yeah.
So I mean you often talk to young people who are paying their rent, car payment and college fees. And that's their whole salary gone.
Yeah, cars. A decent car is $500 a month. Throw in another $50 a month for insurance.
So if you have a research
insurance,
population, it would be good to
that's $100 a
talk
month
to them.
now.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. So in what direction is our community headed in providing quality housing to a broad spectrum of residents?
Poor people go away. You can't afford it.
I guess we're not.
Right.
Or this meeting is the first in starting to address it.
And I didn't realize was that this many government statewide programs are available, and that would certainly help. Especially weatherization. There's a lot of people that are spending $1,000 a month right now.
Right.
And that oil truck backs up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know the details yet about the water and septic, but it would be great if you have that 3-bedroom house and your upgrade could include what extra work you need to do to make an ADU on your property. Or to look at how to separate out a pretty big house into a duplex, which would change your septic design as well. So hopefully they have, thought about those.
So maybe you could
Advances.
write into your ordinances that anybody that wants to build a second home here needs to build a caretaker unit.
A mother-in-law apartment, yeah.
To go for local workforce housing. And then you'd give them some kind of deal. I mean, joking aside, the housing problem in the rural areas, like Plymouth, like Woodstock, is not going to be solved by somebody coming in and building 24 units.
No.
It's going to be solved by this homeowner building an extra unit, this one building 2 extra units, this one at a time is how we're going to get there.
And that's how we're going to have to relax some of our zoning standards. But our zoning, our long-range plan is, Plymouth is a rural town, and the people of Plymouth want it to stay rural. Putting in duplexes in, I grew up in Boston, a 3-decker, isn't what people in Plymouth want.
No. So we need to make these accessory dwelling units look like a regular house, and nobody even knows that 2-family lives there.
Yeah.
It's just that thing that I'll send you a load of photos, but there's like an apartment over the garage. It's always looked like that. You
Yeah.
just use it for storage. Or there's that little bit on the side of the house that's a separate unit. And so you're not changing the physical nature of this place at all, but you're creating homes.
Right.
Absolutely.
As I was going past the old campground there, I was thinking, what a waste that is,
Yes.
Back in a bunch of single wides. Plus,
Well,
it
that's
has a sewer system all ready to go.
Oh, wow.
And power. And water.
Who owns that right now, Mike?
Yerkowicz.
Who used to own the store?
Yep. No, he never owned the
Panagrossi
store.
owns it. Panagrossi.
Panagrossi
Panagrossi
owns it,
owns it.
that's
Oh,
correct.
Walls Round Top.
Yes.
It's an opportunity.
And
One
it could be an opportunity
starting
for
place
the,
would be the White House down here that I think Panagrossi owns.
Yep, it's part of it's a little,
It's not part of
Well,
this campground.
right,
It's a separate unit.
yep, it's a separate parcel.
Yep.
Yep.
It's right on a major thoroughfare.
and it could be a great location for the modular homes.
Yes.
20-story concrete building, just like HUD did in the 1960s. That would solve all our problems.
And make you really popular.
Sure, concrete, everything, so it doesn't burn.
What do you do, a variance for that?
Sure.
But we want this to really be the scenic byway.
Now we're gonna put it right on Route 100A. So everybody can enjoy it. Right on the Woodstock line. Duplex and accessory dwellings, I think that's a very good option to try to relax our standards in some way, shape, or form in order to provide that opportunity. I'm just afraid, and knowing how this works, that all of a sudden Joe Skier is occupying the thing 6 months a year, paying $20,000 up front, and the property owner chooses that over the welfare mother.
Yes.
And that's the part that really,
Yeah.
it's a capitalistic society, and rentals historically are are difficult. You have to have a full-time babysitter for them, and you got to clean up the trash when they move out. They don't pay their security deposit. They don't. So it's a tough sell.
So we haven't got any ideas on this yet, but I think that we've got to find a solution with employers too. Like Jay's talking about his employees. Would you vouch for them?
Yeah, I think we
And
would
then
find-
maybe they're special.
Yeah.
People who are going to work locally and you know the employer. And then maybe you get over some of these misgivings.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to organize it, but I think there's got to be a solution.
In
there.
many cases, well, like the fella at the Echo Lake Inn, he knows who those employees are. He's controlling their wages. And if they don't pay their rent, well, we all know what happens in a company town.
One is his brother.
So, years ago, the Tyson store, if you worked in the sawmill, I believe it was Spalding owned it. You worked in the sawmill, you went to the Tyson store to buy your groceries. Or you lived in one of his many modular homes that were scattered out throughout Dublin Road. We don't want to be in that position.
No, definitely not. And so there's some way of working. There must be some way that we can think of working with the employer to vouch for a renter to take away a lot of these misgivings. But it's not. I don't believe in company towns either.
Yeah.
I come from coal mining Wales.
Okay.
So a lot of the focus at this state level is to try to promote development in downtown centers so that there isn't sprawl, so that Plymouth stays looking like Plymouth and Vermont stays looking like Vermont. And so I do believe the one unit at a time model is certainly a great way to go. Although we do have real estate downtown with not much on it.
We're very fortunate down here. There's a couple of homes that, Ralph Michael's old office that got kind of cleaned up and painted and
You know, the old fire station?
the old
that
fire
Rocco
station,
owns?
yeah. There's another one. We've been very fortunate. Now I believe that it's kind of a yellowish house that's in the downtown. The taxes have been paid on it. Would make a nice duplex or triplex.
How do you address the property owners and let them know that there is a need for this town for the building that they have, such as Panagrossi's building or Hawk, who I believe owns the old firehouse? You know the one I'm talking about?
Yep.
The white building that's
It's on the left as you're going
Yes,
south.
yeah, it's empty, it's not used for anything.
My argument has always been eliminate the state property tax, the education tax, give them a 5-year credit on it, give them a 5-year credit on property tax. The state does not want to hear that. That's just something that you cannot give away the $17 on the 1,000.
Can you do it how much can you do as a town?
0.
No property tax holidays?
Nope. Because of the Department of Public Valuation and Review, PVR. Property Valuation and Review. You just can't not pay. You can't take a house off the tax rolls.
Can you give them a holiday and say you don't pay for 2 years, so you owe this tax, but we're going to pay it for you?
The town could pay the tax for them,
Right.
but you can't not pay it.
So maybe you could do that as a town, or investigate that as a town.
That would have to go through a town vote. It did for
Bethany Birch's.
Bethany Birch's, yeah, it's due to expire, next year?
But
And that was a bit of a pull, too. I mean,
It was a close vote.
Yeah.
Very close.
I think it's all done on a one-to-one basis, though, of how do you approach them.
Definitely.
And then try and make it an attractive package, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about.
I don't know if we've waived our fees. I think we have, in a few instances, waived the fees, zoning permit fees. Have we waived those?
probably it would be necessary for someone to buy the property from the present owner. And that's where perhaps the grants that you have outlined here would come into play.
Maybe that's a way
But
forward.
getting the owner to sell it is not an easy thing to do.
Well, and then you need the
People
money to
have
buy it.
tried.
You need the money to buy it.
And then the other thing that someone suggested was the town owns 3 houses on Hawk, I believe.
Oh, really?
I did not know that.
Lots of.
Oh, they're lots,
Yeah.
so I thought they're houses, but that came up in tax sale. The town ended up having to buy them. That might be an option too.
Where the town already owns the land?
The town purchased it in a tax sale.
Yes.
So they don't own it yet.
Okay.
Okay.
It
I
takes
did-
12 months.
There is one of the programs that specifically addresses if the town wanted to donate property for this type of program, and please forgive my brain for not being able to remember which one, but I could find that out and then get back to you.
Wow, it sounds like there's lots of possibilities to start exploring one at a time.
3 of the parcels that would qualify for the next tax sale are vacant lots.
Up in Hawk.
2 of them are in Hawk. One of them is Cam Johnson, which is a very tiny place in a very expensive neighborhood. So,
That's in addition to the 3 that the town already owns.
yeah.
But if some of those expensive ones could be sold, then the town starts a kitty to be spent on something more.
To have those monies designated, you're saying?
Yeah, for a town, for housing, which is then you start to designate its workforce housing, and it can only be used for this purpose and that purpose, but then you're putting some element of control in there.
Unfortunately, the Hawk properties, though, have a say on what is built there, how it appears.
Homeowners Association,
Yeah.
But but you could sell those. That's what I'm saying. Sell the expensive property, buy lower price property.
Well, I believe we didn't pay a whole lot for them.
No,
Oh.
we just paid
And
taxes.
unfortunately, the Hawk lots typically go for less
Yeah.
than regular building lots
Yeah.
because nobody wants the restrictions
Oh, I
unless you're
see.
like really into that type
Right.
of.
Yeah, the restrictions and
Oh, well,
homeowners.
it was just an
fees.
idea. But I think having some, so the Woodstock Economic Development Commission has this small amount of money for grants, and that's what's helped get people interested in doing something. $10,000 here, $5,000 here. Not very much money, but it's got us in conversation with people to say, well, and then, so you'd like to do this, and then there's a bigger grant, and you can be helped by this way, and it's kind of working without that much money.
Yes. So this is, there are needs assessments that can be done on a very high level, but I truly believe that the stories that we know from the folks that live here in Plymouth are just as valuable. And for the small scale that we're going to be working on, I think it's just as meaningful. In order to work in this direction, I think it's going to take some human resources. A housing committee would be great to pull together. Because if the force isn't communicating with landowners and property owners and getting the word out there about what the overall community need is, then it will likely stay stagnant.
And the stories help, because if you can find some stories about people who really need a property, and they're not the welfare mom who's going to leave the trash all over the place and need assistance of all kinds, but they're people that work for Farm and Wilderness, and they're young and they have college education and they want to do this and they want to do that. Those stories that you're building can help direct you when you're thinking about what programs do we need to design, or who can, or when you're talking to landowners about what it is you're trying to do. They just help to get rid of some of the images that we have in our minds to be what's really happening and what's really wanted. And if you could find any stories about people, maybe people have had to leave because they couldn't find anywhere to live.
That has happened here in Plymouth.
Yeah.
Well, that
For
family
sure.
that was burned out, they couldn't find any place to live.
And so where have they ended up?
I don't know where they ended up, actually.
And in terms of early in this conversation, you were speaking about the aesthetics of Plymouth. Vermont wants Vermont to continue looking how Vermont is today. What is the best type of situation for the lots just south of here, to the right and left, along this beautiful scenic byway?
100-acre zoning.
Perfect. I mean, now we're done.
I think it was probably about 20 years ago. What they did is they basically drew in purple crayon all along the major roads as 5-acre zoning. Most of that 5-acre zoning has been subdivided at least once, and I would say it's probably half of the housing units available in that 5-acre zoning have been used up. The village areas, which allow for a postage stamp lot, as we refer them to, are pretty full too. The Tyson is probably a little bit more room for growth. Here in this village, the only real growth would take place further up Route 100A, where it's very steep and very difficult to build. So there isn't a lot of room left.
It'd be nice to see like the little downtown area here again. I'm sure it was dense, 60 or 70 years ago, or more dense than it is, and it would look nice again too.
I have a picture of Good Commons from the 1800s, and there were 3 buildings to the left.
Yeah.
So up Route 100A.
Wow.
Yep.
Yes. It looked like Burlington downtown, but right here in Plymouth. And that store at that point did an amazing business. I found their business register from 1893, I believe, is when they closed that portion of the business for
So
a bit.
the parking lot that you have had buildings in it.
The parking lot had buildings in it. And the stream did not run behind Good Commons. It was in front of Good Commons because we were only traveling by horse and buggy, so the road didn't need to be as wide. So they put the stream behind Good Commons, and I was told, not for sure, but when they went to build a physical road, that's when they diverted the stream,
Yeah.
which has been a source of a lot of excitement for me over the
I'm
years.
surprised it doesn't come in to visit you.
Oh, it comes in all the time. We have a lot of words, that stream and I, but it's really beautiful too. Well, I do believe, I do enjoy how the state looks at putting energy into our downtowns so that our landscape as a whole can stay as beautiful as it currently is. I think that is a visual that we can all get behind. And so perhaps we could look at, there's a couple of lots across the street, there's ground, and start just one place at a time and see what could happen and what resources make the most sense for each lot, and start communicating with our neighbors and friends about home share, about the space above their garage. 5 units in the entire town of Plymouth would be really meaningful. That doesn't scare me when I hear 5 units. Sometimes when you think of percentages, it can get real scary, but.
We have, 300 and something households, approximately 500 resident households, approximately 530 voters. And even using that, 10% of that would be 5, like you said, five units. somewhere in the town.
So it's interesting to set a target like that, isn't it? And just make it 5, but recognise that 5 is meaningful.
Right. It's significant.
But you are thinking that there should be a housing committee, so I mean, should I put something like that in the Plymouth Press?
Yeah.
To try to interest people in becoming part of that committee?
So I can speak from the Woodstock experience. So we made a housing working group within the Economic Development Commission, and we used to meet every week, and we just talked things through, and then ended up with some programs, and are now running those programs. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of conversation. We would meet, then we'd go and research things, and then we'd meet, and then we'd research things, and we'd go and interview people. And it's quite interesting work. I think it's very interesting work. It's very important work. But you need a team of people to keep. It's not the sort of thing one person can do. So a couple of people who are prepared to put some effort behind it. You've got a zoning expert who, we can help you. We can share some of our research if you want to, because we're all working on the same issue. But yeah, and because you talked about possible properties, and it's just one at a time.
So Mike, is this something you'd like to be on the committee if there is?
Nope.
Would you be your counsel?
I'm not volunteering to be on the committee either. I am volunteering to put it
Yes,
out there.
I think that's really a good idea.
I've said yes too many times.
Don't say no to this
You know
one.
as much as you know.
You would be a consultant though if they had questions.
I would be glad to help, but
Okay.
I don't.
It'll be interesting
I don't
what
want people
response.
calling me at 2:00 in the morning.
Who's going to do that?
I get a lot of phone calls at home.
Yeah.
People that are unhappy with their situation.
This is a really challenging time for a lot of people.
A lot of people are having difficulty. We've tried, I think, in our town, and I can't say enough about Elaine, has done a great job with people that walk in the door with problems, and we try to help them. Sometimes it's almost impossible.
Yes.
What sort of things?
And
Oh,
I mean, some of the people they're impossible.
well, there is a slide, which I think might be next, Jay, and it does talk about the hub, which is newly created. So, when I started looking into housing and I reached out to Josh Hanford, who, is the head of housing in the state, and he will be the first to say it's a really complicated process to ensure that state funds are being used in a proper way. That has complication attached to it no matter what. And the same is true for folks that need help with filling out applications to get their child care reduced and to get a free and reduced lunch program, which, we have a break on through COVID, but who knows if that will come back. All of these things is a 7 and 8 page application that is truly rough. And so one of the reasons why the hub was created was to help people through that process. You can go to one person, because if you qualify for one program, the likelihood of you qualifying for many other programs is pretty substantial.
So that's the starting place then.
yes.
That's right.
So we created, the hub has just opened, and Margaret's been advertising it. During the pandemic, a group of us started the Woodstock Area Relief Fund, and we learnt a lot of lessons from that. And then coming out of the pandemic, we didn't want to lose those lessons. And one of the most important things we learned was that we have lots and lots of different services on offer through the state, through different towns, through non-profits. We have lots of organisations that give money to help, like the Memory Tree, like Otakuchi Health Foundation. But knowing who to go to, where to go, is often very difficult. So we've created the hub so that you can fill out one form, meet with one case worker, case advocate, who will help people through the system. And that system might be, I need some money to pay for oil in my tank. That's what it was last winter. But it might be, I know I'm eligible for food stamps, but I don't know how to do this. So somebody will help you to do that. So there'll be short-term help if you really can't afford to buy food, there's short-term help, and then there's longer-term help to help you get to that state program that will do what it needs to do to help you long-term.
Do most programs, though, require someone to give, in order to apply for it, to give their financial information?
Only some of them. Only
Not
some
all
of
of
them.
them, then.
Some of them are very strict, and some of them are not. And so another thing we learned during the pandemic is that all of us might need help, no matter what our income.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's house could burn down. That's a perfect person to help. Somebody might have 2 parents, 3 kids. Main wage earner walks out. That person is in a predicament, a crisis. Their last year's tax return looks great. So some people would exclude them, but we're not going to do that. So we're looking to help people who are in a crisis maybe through no fault of their own, or who are put in a crisis by the fuel prices right now, so that their budget is not working properly for them.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but every now and then I do get a question of like, how can I help? Would the hub be a good place for some people that have good people skills?
Yes, for sure.
Are you accepting volunteers?
Yes, we would like to have more case advocates. So somebody who would be willing to do that we would love to speak to them, yes.
Okay.
And if anybody would like to help financially, they can give to the Plymouth Memory Tree, they can give to the hub. Those would be 2 options as well.
Right.
I don't know if it would make any difference if someone from the hub came and we had a meeting that people could attend.
Yes,
We haven't had a whole lot of luck. I know every once in a while the Council on Aging would come and do that.
right.
Sometimes too, people are embarrassed.
Yes, that's true.
It's we're working really closely with Otakuchi Health Foundation, and they come sometimes, don't they?
Yeah.
But yes, it would be nice to get a group. Maybe do the Tyson ladies still meet? It would be nice to get a group together.
They do.
Because we need advocates. So it's not just the people that need the help. I think we need advocates in the community who will say to people, "Oh, why don't you apply to these guys?" And then then they're on their own, but they've been pointed in the right direction.
Now, last year, I'm on the committee at the Mennonite Church.
Yes.
Are they part of the hub now?
Yes, they.
Okay, because Wendy hasn't said anything to the rest of our group, and I was just wondering.
We've really only just opened, so working out the relationships with the partners is going to take a while.
Because we worked a lot with Beth last year.
Yes, so that was our trial, working with the Mennonite Church and with Beth, so that sometimes the church will be the people who give us people who need help, and sometimes they'll provide some funds towards it.
Yeah, we have, it's not a huge fund, but it's a...
Yeah, but it can always go further with other money from other places that we can get.
And we've done that.
Yes.
We've gathered money from different places to come up with the full
Yes.
need.
Yeah, we're trying to put in really good rules about confidentiality, so that people feel very safe coming to us, so that not many people are going to know their business. Because, like I said, it could be any of us that needs help just temporarily, and we don't need everybody to know our business.
And so I do believe that advocating throughout the community is strong. You may not want to come to a meeting because then everybody knows that you need the help, but a private phone call feels much safer to folks.
Right.
So
Or you're just in conversation and finding out about something and say, have you tried? Have you approached?
And one interesting thing that's come up through some of the meetings that I've been at the Hub is a talk about financial literacy and really looking at how do you budget and where is your money going. I work with my employees a lot. Sometimes they get confused or frustrated with credit cards and how to move money and manage debt loads and student loans, and so I sit with them and crack that open and talk about savings and interest rates, and that's saved a lot of money. And
So someone from the hub could do that. I mean,
Yes, yes.
I've worked for the Council on Aging for
Yes.
8 years. And then I was a consultant on a housing project. So I would sign people up for these things. Of course, they've all changed. There's nothing the same as it used to be.
Right. So we work a lot with Carla Camel. She's
Oh, I know.
like,
I was an advocate with Carla many years
okay.
ago.
So we have volunteer case advocates, and then Carla and Beth are like our professionals. So the volunteers will deal with the simple cases, and when they need advice, they go to Carla, so that they always feel like they have all the support they need.
And she's great. She's come out here to visit
Yes.
people for me.
Yeah. And she's getting busier and busier, so hopefully this will help her.
so it's going to take a village. I can't thank you enough for this great conversation, and I really hope that we can continue more. What does everyone think? I know surveys can be challenging, but putting out a housing survey to the town, does anyone have thoughts about that?
We tried that a few times, and I think it's a great idea. With our zoning, when we developed our last zoning plan,
I think we'd like maybe to gather some data on like a wider, I mean, including that, but like a wide range of,
Yeah.
right? Just to get some, see where people are at.
What would you want to know?
I think, what are people's priorities in the town, right?
you have housing, taxes,
Yeah.
taxes being number one.
Yeah.
Everyone's so worried that the taxes are going to increase. Of course they're going to increase. We're going to have to be reassessed in the town, and it's going to go up significantly.
And everything's going up.
Everything has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
A gallon of milk is over $6.
So weatherization becomes more and more important.
Yeah, very important.
Getting all the grant money you possibly can is more
Yeah.
I see
important.
Craig's got his hand up in the Zoom chat. Craig, did you want to say something? And you're on mute. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to know, as far as the single-family residential zoning, how is the zoning department going to change it to, because if you have two separate families, whether it's a single person, persons living together with children, whatever the scenario is, single-family residential should be just as it implies. I think stretching and bending, as zoning laws, isn't really the answer. So, regardless of the lot size, if it's zoned single-family residential, not commercial, I think we should stick to that. And I think it's gonna have to be a zoning issue down the road to be discussed by the town as a whole, not individually. I think it's something, a very
States already
broad range
agree with
thing, commercial versus residential. And that's my thoughts.
I think it would be something worth looking into because the state has done some work on it. So it would be worth looking into it as you were talking about doing anyway.
That's good information to get from people.
I don't think anywhere in our zoning is it defined as SFR, single-family residential. Now, our taxation is done a little bit differently. For example, if you had an accessory dwelling attached to a single-family residential, they're taxed at two very different rates. Or they're assessed,
So
assessed at different rates. So I'll have to do some research, Craig, to answer your question.
There are a lot of towns that have shifted their zoning to allow for duplexes and multifamily to help solve the housing needs, that's for sure. Whether or not Plymouth wants to go in that direction is up to the town.
but that would be interesting information to collect, wouldn't it?
Yes. And find out maybe there's places that people think it's appropriate and maybe there's places where they think it's
not appropriate, absolutely. Right.
Well, single-family and two-family dwellings are permitted in all but the conservation district,
And the conservation district is,
state-owned land over state-owned land.
over state-owned land, okay.
It's over 2,500 square feet. high.
2,500, yeah, elevation,
Yeah.
and it's,
We
at
don't
one
have all
time, our conservation district included the high points of our town and some of the larger tracts of land. That was changed back in 2000.
I think our
13.
zoning is lenient with this, isn't it, as far as,
We, our permitted uses for a single and
Yeah.
two-family dwelling, it's permitted in all zoning districts
Yeah.
except conservation.
That's
we
great.
don't have much
That-
conservation
That's
area.
very open.
Yep.
And our units per building, in our 2-acre zoning is 4, our 5-acre zoning is 4, our 10-acre zoning is 4, and our village is 12 units per building.
Oh,
Really?
And those are our dimensional standards that, for each zone. However, the square footage is limited,
To 5,000.
5,000 square feet. That's in RD 2, 5, 10. Village is 4,000 square feet. So your 12 units per building, gonna be pretty small units
Yeah.
at 4,000.
And is that 5,000 square feet of space or building footprint? Just to-
Building foot,
Right now, it's building footprint.
yeah.
Okay.
Parking would be a big deal with that.
Yeah. Some of the places we have now are, well, the one up on Hawks is over almost 10,000 square feet.
Okay. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the slide deck. Does anybody have any last questions or thoughts?
I was just wondering what Craig's concern was.
I think Craig was interested in keeping the residential nature of the town just that. Is what it sounded like. And Craig, did you want to?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, Jay. I just feel that if somebody owns property and they have, say, 20 acres, and it was purchased as a single-family residential unit, as listed in Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, they understand it's a single family. So I,
Doesn't
as
mean it stays
a
that way.
no.
as a resident, would assume that that is a single-family residence. There's not been changed to a multifamily dwelling. So I think is my point, and you asked it, and this is my point, that it should be clarified that any property other than state-owned land in Plymouth can have a two-family. So if there's a listing that comes up and it says single-family residential, that's not valid in the town of Plymouth, I think. I think there's a big distinction between single-family residential, and hey, by the way, if you make it a two-family, to it's a single-family residential. Just like if you bought commercial property, it's commercial, you have different levels. You have industrial, you have whatever. So if somebody says, I'm selling my commercial property, well, you might think, oh, they're gonna, put whatever there, and they put a nuclear power plant or whatever. I mean, you can get ridiculous about it, but it's still a single-family residential sold as that or purchased as that should be used as that. That is my point, and that's all I have to say on the issue.
Sounds like realtor language versus zoning language.
Right.
No, I don't think it's realtor language versus zoning language. I think it's when a deed is recorded, town hall gets the record. If it's passing through, 10 hands, people need to know it's a single-family residential. This is not a commercial property. It goes in a different file box, or it's whatever, a two-family. I think there's a separation. no different than if you owned an inn, it's classified different than a single-family residential. So if you own a village grocery store or whatever, it's classified different. It's looked upon different. And I think that distinction needs to be made in this new road that we're going down.
So if Plymouth has it currently as 2 units, you would want that potential to be consistently recognized?
Yes, I would. I think that, I think it would be a surprise to many of the homeowners here in Plymouth to know that, you know what, you're actually zoned for a multifamily, a 2-family or a 4-family. I think a lot of people would be like, really? I can build an apartment and rent it out? I really think that would be an eyebrow raiser in most people's opinions. They wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I knew that. I think most people would be like, wow, I didn't know that. And that's my point. I think there needs to be an awareness of zoning and what we're really looking at, versus what, just passing it through and say, okay, you could just put another auxiliary or ancillary, whatever you want to call it, apartment in the backyard, and okay, that's it. I think people need to be aware of at the same time, what they have available to them. Maybe there's people that want to take advantage of this, but I don't think it's a commonly held knowledge.
I would agree.
You really have a property that you could put another, apartment on.
Yeah, I think that's, it's good, it's good.
And get $30,000 or $50,000 from the state to do it. I don't think people realize it in one sense, and I think it needs to be announced in another sense, if you follow me. I think the awareness, I don't think is there. At least I'm not aware of it.
And perhaps that's the first step.
No.
Excuse me?
Perhaps that's the first step to build awareness.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Great point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for coming, Tish, to speak with us, visiting Plymouth, even though you are a property owner here as well.
I visit Plymouth regularly.
Thanks, Jill.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And I will continue to share through Margot and any other means new programs that will come out from the state all the time. I don't always know the answer, but I can hopefully get you to the person that can answer the question. So that's my goal, is to be of service.
I'd like to connect with you before I put something in, okay?
Great.
And Mike, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for saying yes.
You were an extremely valuable member to this committee tonight.
Well, I tried to memorize this thing this morning, but
You just need to know where to look.
yeah. I do just want to mention that one of the items in our goals is to allow for accessory dwellings.
Great.
To clarify that. So,
It is a goal.
yeah, it is a goal, and it's something that we've come across often.
Okay, and I will send you those pictures because I think it's worth allaying people's fears that a 12-unit building is going to turn up, and I'll show you these pictures, which they just show you won't even know what's going on. There'll be 2 families living there, and you won't know. They look the same, and I think that could help.
I absolutely agree. And I also wanted to just thank Okemo Valley TV for recording this tonight. Sarah, you're wonderful.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.